This podcast is brought to you by the Albany Public Library main branch and the generosity of listeners like you. What is a podcast? God, Daddy, these people talk as much as you do. Razib Khan's Unsupervised Learning.
Thanks for listening to the ungated version of the Unsupervised Learning podcast. If you want to read some essays on some of these topics, please check out razib.substack.com. Again, that's razib.substack.com. Thank you.
Hey, everybody. I'm here with my friend Megan McArdle. And, she's been on a couple of times, and she's been talking about LLMs with, the internet, as you do. And so I decided to ask the LLMs to give a funny intro for her because obviously I can intro her. I do actually know her, but like I'm gonna ask Chat. I asked ChatGPT, Claude, and Gemini. I didn't ask Grok. I've stopped using Grok. I don't know. I'm sorry, Elon. I asked Grok about internet controversies because Grok would know that really well. Okay, so they all have their uses. So this is what ChatGPT said. Megan McArdle is what happens when a contrarian internet brain grows up, gets respectable, and still refuses to stop asking the annoying question everyone else is trying to glide past. She writes about economics, policy, and the strange habits of modern institutions with a cheerful energy of someone who has actually read the spreadsheet, the footnotes, and the fine print, and decided that wasn't nearly enough. She is a columnist at the Washington Post, a longtime observer of how smart people, bad incentives, and human nature collide, and one of the few writers who can make arguments about regulation, housing, and bureaucracy feel less like medicine and more like a blood sport. What do you think? That's pretty good.
I like it.
Really good.
You will have to assess whether that is accurate, but I certainly enjoyed the praise. It's
It's like ChatGPT really loves you. I haven't asked very much about you before, so that all comes honest. I kind of had you on the podcast because I feel like I'm listening to you constantly now. You are on podcast after podcast. So talk about the various podcasts you are on now. Just the main ones, because you have multiple ones you're on regularly.
I do. I'm a regular on the Dispatch Roundtable. I co-host Central Air with Josh Barrow and Ben Dreyfuss, and I have my own podcast at the Washington Post called Reasonably Optimistic, in which we explore policy ideas from a reasonably optimistic, let us call it, standpoint.
Yeah. Which I think, that's a good title, I think, knowing your oeuvre. But, so I actually, tweeted out just randomly. I'm in, I guess I can say this. I'm in some chats with Ross Douthat, and, we're friendly. Not as friendly. I don't see, because Ross lives in, rural New England or something. But no, maybe he lives I don't know,
in Connecticut.
Well, whatever. It's somewhere really obscure. I'm not gonna when I go to New York City, I'm not gonna go. So I don't see him very often. Although he did visit me in Austin when he was promoting his last book, with my little group. But so someone mentioned someone mentioned to a mutual was oh yeah, that massive podcaster, Ross Douthat. And I'm just Ross Douthat's been around for a long time. He's a columnist of the New York Times since 2010 or so. He's been a columnist for a long time. And then you have someone like Ezra Klein. I'm sure people know him mostly from his podcast and not Wonk Blog. So it's these old bloggers, you among them. I'm also among them, but I don't do as much podcasting as you guys. But you guys are now known for this podcasting stuff. I think more than you're
like
writing.
to think that I'm known for it, but
you're on.
I'm late to the podcast game.
Well, you gotta watch. Yeah, you gotta watch it. But you're making up for it in quantity because this is it's really weird because I do have Central Air in my road, and I was the first time I listened, I was oh yeah, Megan's super reasonable, and then the Dispatch comes on, it's Megan McArdle. I'm wait, am I going insane? Because I literally just heard you, and so I was wait, was that a different, because it's really random when you don't consciously try to sign up for listening to someone and then you hear them in two simultaneous podcasts in a row. That was weird, and I was okay. And then you got your new podcast, and so do you think why do you think you guys are big podcasters now? Do you think you guys have these general communication talents, or it's just incumbency advantage?
So look, there's incumbency advantage. I have the ability to go to the Washington Post and say, I want to do a podcast. Random person on the street does not, because I have worked for the Washington Post for 8 years and they have not worked for the Washington Post for 8 years. So that's definitely part of it. I mean, another part of it, I think, is that everyone is looking at the future of the business and concluding that writing is going to be less of a part of that. That we need to reach new audiences, right? Like if you look at the average age of newspapers, it's quite old. And it's not as old as linear television, which is really like the average age of the audiences for like television news is 50, like late 50s, 60s, even 70s. And younger people don't get their news that way. When you look at analysis of how younger people are getting their news, first of all, they're not looking for news, most of them, in the way that people used to. Because a newspaper used to be a bundle of a bunch of stuff. You would, again, this is not like an in-house secret. Everyone who looks at the industry knows this. Classified ads used to provide like half the revenue for newspapers. And a newspaper was a big bundle of like, there were the classified ads, but there were also the movie times and the department store ads and the weather and the stock prices. And then, buried in there would be some news. And within the newsroom, the prestige stuff was to report news and get scoops. And the kind of lower level beat was often the police beat, the metro beat, and then you would work your way up to national or to be a columnist. And so that was kind of the prestige hierarchy, but actually where the money was coming from was almost inverted from the internal prestige hierarchy of journalism. Where the money was coming from was from people who needed to buy a car. But once they bought a newspaper, right, they might not really be that interested in reading all of it. They might only be looking for the box scores for sports, for example. But they would flip past it. They'd read some stories. And that's all gone. The newspaper's unbundled. And the people who are getting news now, who are below the age of 30 especially, tend to be people who have kind of encountered it incidentally. They turned on the television and there was a news alert, or they were on TikTok and they heard about something, but they aren't going and looking for news, which means that people who want to reach those people have to go hunting where the folks are. And so partly that's audio, but increasingly it's video. Is that I think you know this, a lot of people know this, that podcast, for whatever reason, the podcast sites don't have great discovery engines. And so you get an audience by like people seeing you on Twitter or so forth, but you don't get an audience very often because people are kind of searching Apple Podcasts for something to listen to. On the other hand, you do get that kind of audience on YouTube. And so that's why you will see that Ezra and Ross and me in my Washington Post podcast are all on YouTube. And increasingly things are getting made for YouTube because that's where you have the biggest potential to reach a large audience.
Yes, I do. This is posted. For the ungated version, which I release pretty much all the podcasts free. I do post them all on YouTube, or my guy does. I got a guy. The guy does post it.
You got a guy.
YouTube. Yeah, it was because Zoomers are. This is a generational thing. Millennials, God bless them. But even though I don't believe in God, but whatever, that's a separate issue. They will actually subscribe to things. Zoomers, they only will they are beholden to the drip, to the algorithm, to the feed.
Yeah.
They don't even bother subscribing. It's annoying. It's a hassle for them. Zoomers have literally told me this. They're like, you put things on YouTube and like I just get the stuff that I want, or the stuff that I know I want, so it's a whole different information economy, or information ecosystem. Right? And we have like the two of us in a way, like, you more, obviously professionally, but have like observed it changing over the last, literally a generation now. Literally a generation. We have like been doing this stuff for a generation. I've
been doing this for 25 years.
I don't even. Yeah, both of us. Yeah. Well, I mean, you started blogging a little before me, but like not that. I started blogging in March of 2002. I'll say it that way. I used to say 2002.
Yeah, I started just before you then, because I officially started in November of 2021, but I didn't really do anything with it until January.
Mhm.
So we were
Yeah, there's
pretty
a lot of people. I think like for some reason, the first half of 2002, a lot of stuff was going on. And then obviously, the Iraq war and, war stuff, which like, I feel like
Yeah.
that's something like some things never change now with where we are, but whatever. I don't really want to talk too much about the war because I don't really know what to say because I'm just like, whatever. Well, not whatever, but you know what I'm saying. It's like, what do we say?
I
It's like
don't really know what to say. I sit
Yeah.
in, I'm on the ed board I have a lot of jobs.
Yeah.
In addition to having,
That's what you do
these
today.
podcasts.
Yeah, you got a lot of jobs.
Yeah, this is thank God for AI. I'm not
Yeah.
really, it is a massive, I don't use it for actual writing, obviously, and I don't ever take anything it says without checking it myself with the sources. But just the ability to like throw my jumbled notes for a podcast in and be like, can you organize this and do an actual script?
Yeah.
Follow, is super useful. And, but like I'm on the ed board of the Washington Post, and obviously we read a lot about Iran right now, but I got the Iraq war wrong. And my policy is I looked at that after I'd gotten it wrong. And I thought, like, where did I go wrong? I think there were a bunch of cognitive errors, one of which was imagining that like Saddam Hussein looked to me like someone who had weapons of mass destruction. And therefore I reasoned that he must have them. And I didn't think, well, I'm not actually the dictator of a large Middle Eastern oil power. And if I were, I might reason differently about things. And you might not, I might not think of all of the things that are the constraints on his behavior. And so I thought I didn't get that right because I don't know very much about foreign policy. And I could learn about foreign policy, but I have already more expertise in domestic policy. And I think I'm just going to lean into the stuff that I know about. It's not that I don't ever have opinions. I have a pretty firm opinion that Ukraine are the good guys in the Ukraine-Russian war. But I don't have a lot of opinions about what should be done, simply because like I know I lack expertise in this, and I've decided to leave those hard questions to the domain experts. I have basic opinions like the Iranian regime was bad and destabilizing the United States, and much more destabilizing to its region.
Yeah.
But like less destabilizing for us, but a danger to U.S. interests.
Yeah.
But as I like to say, as I've written over and over and over the years, the existence of a problem does not imply the existence of a solution.
Yeah.
The fact that Iran was bad does not mean that therefore there was something you could do that would be better than leaving Iran in place. And other than that, I let the pointy heads who spend a lot of time thinking about this stuff argue it out. We have very good foreign policy people. I am just not one of them.
Yeah, I mean, what you do talk about, or what I think like, you have focused more about is like over the last so many years since that debacle is and maybe we can talk a little bit about Iran and oil later, but is economics, those sorts of things, and I do want to talk to you about populism and just like put my cards on the table. I'm starting to like as they say on the internet, like chimp out about populism. I'm getting like really sick of it at this point. A little bit of populism, okay, like but like.
You're talking about the winning, Razib, would you say?
I don't get my listeners angry at me, but yeah, I mean, like, look, I mean, it's I call it the rise of the retard right and the retard left. They're like, for example, the banning institutional investment in housing. Okay, like, kill me. That's, I mean, and like this is like agreed upon now by both broad swaths of the right and the left, and again, like, I don't want to sound like an asshole, but like sometimes you have to be the asshole. This is stupid as fuck. It's like retarded. And the politicians, they've both now started bidding up populism, or populist, populist sentiments like are now like on offer. Like this is what the public demands. And, because like I'm obviously, I'm not on the left. I've never been on the left, but, I'm seeing them say things. I'm like, oh my God, that is so dumb. And then I realize, oh crap, but the right is also saying that, when it comes to like entitlements, economic policy, it's like Trump does these moronic tariffs. And I'm seeing people like Bernie Sanders like, well, you know what? He's got a good point. Oh my God. It's like we have like no. I'll give you an example. I think it was in 2008. So, I'm obviously like very interested in evolution and genetics. About half, like less than half now because of secularization of the public, they're creationists. They don't really think too much about it. It's not like a big issue for them. So it doesn't usually impinge. And in fact, it hasn't for a generation because of the decline of the Christian right. But in 2008, like, some moderator at a debate asked the Republicans a gotcha. And Mitt Romney had a really good answer as a Mormon, how he reconciled, this like, scientific theory of evolution with his religion. It was really good. I'm just like, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Mitt Romney, like he was not a popular, he was a smart guy. He was a right-wing smart guy. He knew exactly how to answer everything to not seem retarded, But now the Republicans, no matter how smart they are, they be leaning into this. They're like, yeah, we are stupid. We are just as stupid as our voters. Okay, I'm sounding like really unpleasant right now, but I'm getting really frustrated because I personally feel, I'm starting to see like the car like start to like fall off, run off the bridge in my lifetime now. We're seeing it, right? Like, how are you feeling yourself? You're a libertarian, which is not libertarian-ish, libertarian themed person. Person of libertarian tendencies. I don't know.
So people among Jewish people, there are a lot of gradations of kosher, and one of the gradations is kosher style, where you will eat non-kosher meat, but you won't eat things that are treif.
Yeah.
And so, there's a lot of gradations of libertarian, and you could call me libertarian style. I am fundamentally suspicious of government power, and I am fundamentally committed wherever possible to maximizing individual liberty, even if that lets people do things that aren't great for themselves. But I also recognize some wrinkles to that, and am willing to discuss interventions that go beyond the classic, like, are you a danger to other people imminently? An example of that would be involuntary commitment, where I just think you have people, the legal rulings of the 70s, and also some of the laws, which have been a big obstacle to dealing with the problem of people who are basically unable to take care of themselves. Right. They cannot formulate preferences that are pro-survival.
Yeah.
Because they're so deep in either drug addiction, often traumatic brain injury, various kinds of cognitive disability, mental illness. And I would involuntarily commit people who are voluntarily choosing to like live on the streets, awash in their own filth, getting sick all the time. I think there are externalities there, which is what conservatives are often very concerned about. But I also think it doesn't honor the dignity of the person to allow someone whose brain has gone wrong in a deep way to live like that.
Yeah.
I would also I also support, I support health insurance and all sorts of benefits for kids under the age of 18. I support supporting people who have disabilities, including old age. So in that way, I've often departed, already quite significantly from the more purist libertarians who I admire for their intellectual consistency, but I can't bite the moral bullets that they are willing to bite.
I used to be, look, I've read Rothbard, like I know that whole scene a little bit. I used to read Lou Rockwell, like, you go through this phase. I do appreciate the libertarian, like 100 proof, like full-throated gale force libertarians exist to run the thought experiment. But I live in the real world. I have 3 kids. It's just like you go through phases in life and you realize, well, so for example, online gambling. Okay. Again, like people should be able to do as adults. On the other hand, I don't know. I mean, I'm going to be honest. Like, I think we should really look at online gambling and whether it should be allowed because of the havoc that it's wrecking on a lot of younger, more impulsive males. So the
let
sports
me
gambling in
let me
particular.
let me make the defense here. I would not be against rules that introduced some kind of friction. For example, you might ban betting within games, which seems to me like, in many ways, just kind of the worst kind of betting, because you're so wrapped up in it, and you're placing bets over and over again, and that's not great. But I would also point out, look, this is an industry that we spend about as much on online gambling as we spend on pets. This is not like the extent of the threat can get exaggerated, which is really not to say that there are not people who have absolutely wrecked their lives. There are. But I also think it's a little bit like COVID. America has banned gambling for so long that we're immunologically naive. But like Britain has had gambling forever. And it doesn't seem to one-shot young Britons the way it does. Again, some of them will go wrong. I think you have to ask at some point, is it worth the cost to liberty to prevent the small number of people who will wreck themselves? Because there are infinite ways to wreck yourself. And so I tend to think we'll probably eventually develop the cultural technology that allows this to be done more responsibly. It's just right now it is ripping through the population because it's been unavailable for so long. And I think similarly about prediction markets, right? I like prediction markets. There does seem to be some evidence of insider trading in prediction markets, and particularly disturbing insider trading from government officials, which is bad in a number of ways. Like, I can make the free market argument that no, actually, this is good because we're getting information faster. But I think that's not right. And like, first of all, our enemies can also get that information. And second of all, I just think this is obviously official corruption and so forth. But, there are ways to stop that well short of banning prediction markets, which I've seen, for example, Dylan Esper, who I have a lengthy and very amicable online relationship. He's on Twitter. We talk a lot on Twitter and go back and forth. But, you could say cap the winnings of this at $5,000, right? And that, I think, would have about the same effect, because there are people, look, you should not be willing to sell out your country at any price or violate the oath of office that you took. But there are people who were willing to do that for, say, $200,000 or $500,000 who are not going to do that for $5,000. It's not worth the risk of going to prison. And so just cap the amount to an amount that still gives people an incentive to participate, but does not give people an incentive to cheat in ways that are really deleterious to society. And I think, you could do something similar with gambling. You could cap the amount, right? You can online gamble, but you can't spend more than X on a bet. You could ban gambling within games, which I think is probably bad, as I said. But, I think I get very nervous when the government starts banning something, even if it's something that I don't particularly enjoy. I don't, like, for example, I favor legalizing fentanyl in order to clean up the drug supply. Right now, the variable quality is what kills a lot of people. That you don't know how potent the stuff you're getting is. But I not only have never used fentanyl, I am really aversive to opioids. I've had them once for dental surgery, and it was loathsome. All the people who were like, this is super fun, I found it intensely unpleasant on every level. First of all, it made me really nauseated, and I threw up in the dentist's office. But also, I was bored out of my mind. I cannot imagine people who find this pleasant. I was like, I'm high and I can't think. And this is like, I can't stand it. Please make this be over. And so it's not about like my personal, I want to protect my right to do fentanyl, but I think that there are liberty interests, but you do have to weigh them at some level. Like I've gone back and forth with this with really smart people like Charles Spain Lehman, Keith Humphreys, the late Mark Kleiman, and
Charles wants to put me in prison. I think he wants to put everyone in prison.
I don't think he wants to put you in prison.
No, because I'm a
maybe
eugenicist.
supervised release.
Okay.
But anyway, like I am uneasy with gambling because I don't enjoy it. I like really low stakes gambling. When I first got married, my husband became very concerned because I was playing a lot of online poker before it got banned. And eventually he tried to kind of be cool with it, and then he just finally said, "We have to talk about your gambling habit. How much money are you losing?" And I was like, "Okay, I lost $4.50 last month. The month before I made $12 because I was playing at the micro stakes table. It was
Yeah.
1 cent. It was 1 and 2 cent ante, and then there was I think the maximum you could bet was 25 cents. I do not like gambling any amount of money that I care about. It
Same.
makes me, I cannot even imagine. I understand
I've
that
never
people
done it.
feel it. I do not understand the how that would be enjoyable. It would be just terrorizing for me. But I do like having just enough at stake that it's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And I like the thrill of victory, even if it's
I
a
mean,
trivial victory.
your Irish blood is showing.
Indeed. But I mean, I think that's how I like to think about prediction markets. We should
Mm-hmm.
let people stake enough to keep it interesting, but not let them
Mm-hmm.
stake enough that it is either financially ruinous
Mm-hmm.
or, politically corrosive.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so gambling. Okay, that's the thing. I mean, but I want to go back on the bigger, the populist
Hmm.
trend, because it looks we know where the Republicans are with Trump, and obviously, I mean, I think if some people like on this pod, on the Substack, you don't get the full opinions of me because I don't talk about everything. Like I'm not gonna. I obviously agree with a lot of the administration's policies, especially domestic policies. So I don't want to overstate it, but it's a populist administration. There's some things that just drive me crazy. A bunch of things that drive me crazy. Honestly, a lot of it has to do with fiscal and economic matters, where I think they're being irresponsible. And the issue that I see is the Democrats are like, okay, we see you and we raise you. Is basically their attitude, and so we're having a race on both sides towards this frankly irresponsible populism, in my opinion. And how? I mean, are we just going to have the fiscal crisis? Are we going to have the national bankruptcy? Is that what's going to wake us up, or can we reason people back from the edge? I mean, how do you feel?
We're going to have a fiscal crisis. What that means is up for debate. We're going to have a fiscal crisis in the sense that at some point we are going to get into a bad situation where the interest rates on our debt are rising enough. Okay, let me qualify this. If we reach superintelligence, I don't know, the universe gets weird.
Productivity and the
Cars
economics
are
is
riding around in the sky. We're all living on clouds. And, at that point, I don't know. But assuming that we do not get superintelligence that, rips through the economy and raises the GDP growth to 35%, and or superintelligence just looks around at all the carbon-based life forms and is like, "Why this is very untidy. We should get rid of that." Those resources could be put to better use for silicone production. But assuming that neither of those things happens, we're just kind of past the point of no return to getting a good outcome. I've been screaming about this literally for my entire writing career. And when I started, I would say, this is coming in the 2030s. And it was as if I might as well have said, this is coming, in the year 40,000 AD. It's just, it was so far off that no one paid attention. And that was the point at which we could have had very good outcomes. There were lots of ways to make small tweaks to Social Security, to bring it into balance, to make small tweaks to Medicare. We did not do that. To lightly raise taxes, to lightly change the rules for getting benefits. We did none of that. Instead, we spent more on Medicare, and we did not reform Social Security. And at this point, we're less than a decade off.
Yeah.
The solutions are much harder. Our budget deficits are much larger because of feckless irresponsibility on both sides. I will pause to note that, in fact, most of our debt is driven not by people just deficit spending in normal times. It has been driven by spending on the Great Recession and the pandemic. But, after the pandemic was over, Joe Biden just kept spending like a drunken sailor. Donald Trump has certainly not attempted to rein that in because it would be unpopular.
Yeah.
And so we're going to head for some kind of fiscal crisis that's going to be a combination of persistent inflation, because government debt, like having deficits at this level, is inflationary. And eventually just, sending debt out to the market, asking them to finance it, and realizing that the interest rates are really bad, that they're offering us are really bad. The question is whether that fiscal crisis is going to happen when there's another crisis. And that's the worst case scenario. It's a bit like Greece, right? Why are we trying to borrow this money? Are we trying to borrow this money because we're suddenly in a hot war with China? Are we trying to borrow this money because we just tipped into a massive recession? And if that's the point at which markets know about, that's fiscal crisis territory. That's really, really bad fiscal crisis territory. I don't think it's going to be Greece, but it will be bad enough. It will require dramatic cuts to benefits that people are used to getting. It will require dramatic tax cuts, and those things will make the fiscal problems worse in the short term and the economic problems worse, right? If you're having a recession and the thing you have to do to deal with that recession, just ask the Greeks, is raise taxes and cut spending, that makes the recession worse. It's necessary. And I think the left likes to talk about how the IMF wrecks all these economies by going in and demanding fiscal austerity when things are really bad. And it's like, no, they demand fiscal austerity because there is no way to get out of things being really bad other than to cut back, and you just have to go through the pain. And to be clear, this is not Andrew Mellon, the Secretary of the Treasury under Herbert Hoover, famously was a liquidationist who just thought everything should get as bad as possible to clear the rot out of the system. I am not making that argument. I do believe in some counter-cyclical spending when there's a recession to support the economy. I supported a lot of the pandemic relief, not all of it. It was, I think, way
you
too
you accept the idea of stabilizers, right?
I accept the idea of stabilizers.
I know the the lore, like during the Great Recession in 2000. I mean, you accepted some.
I accepted some of it, although not just the giant stimulus spending. I didn't think that was the best way to go about it. I did accept bailing out the financial system because when you don't bail out the financial system, it's really bad. I understand there's moral hazard. I understand why this made people really mad, but it's just really hard to punish the bankers without punishing everyone else. And so, but my argument is just that if you run into one of these crises when your economy is already bad, that you've got to suck it up, because the debt markets are not going to lend to you. And unlike other, with developing nations, you can at least say, well, generous Western nations should just finance these deficits at very low rates. There are a bunch of reasons we don't do that, which I basically buy, but there's no IMF for the United States. Right? If we have a fiscal crisis, no one is going to help. There is no.
We are the IMF in a way.
We are the IMF. We are the biggest,
we do bail the other people out.
Rich economy in the world.
Who bails out the bailer outers, right?
The answer is no one. So that's another thing, is that while I don't think we're going to have a true Greece style run on the currency as well as fiscal problems, the difference is that Greece could get assistance from the EU, and there's no one who's going to assist us when things get bad.
Yeah. So I feel part of this is, our generation, we're both Gen X, and, even from probably at least our teens, partly because of, the Clinton, the bond market issues in the 1990s, and the fiscal discipline that those imposed on the United States. There was chatter about these fiscal crises in the 1990s, the deficit, the budget deficit, and all these things. And they would talk about, we're never going to get Social Security. And people would say things like this. And so this has been part of our, just growing up as adults and as humans, just it's kind of part of our background furniture, cognitive furniture. And so I feel we are pretty psychologically prepared in a way. I mean, look, you're never going to be prepared for a fiscal crisis. But the point is, people have literally been talking about this since we were tweens,
So yes and no. I mean, part of it is that as you get closer to retirement, you pay taxes, I don't know whether I'll get Social Security or not.
Yeah.
I assume I will get
It's a
something.
real possibility.
But I don't think people are also psychologically prepared for the fact that if you are affluent, your taxes are going to have to go up a lot. And
Yeah.
if you are middle class, your taxes are going to have to go up even more.
Yes.
Let me explain. This is going to upset perhaps some people in your audience, but we could probably get like 2% of GDP out of the wealthy before you run into what are called Laffer curve effects, where basically the Laffer curve kind of got a bad rap because Republicans made a bunch of predictions based on it that turned out not to be true. But the basic insight of the Laffer curve just has to be correct. It's that we don't collect any tax revenue at zero when tax rates are zero. We don't collect any tax revenue when tax rates are 100%, because no one's going to work if they're not getting paid. And somewhere in between there, the curve maximizes. There's a recent paper out of a team at the Joint Committee on Taxation, which is really interesting, which actually suggests that the curve is not like a nice parabolic curve. It's actually, it flattens. It's basically more like a mesa. Like it goes up. The revenue you can collect probably maximizes somewhere 45, 55%. We can argue about the exact amount. But then what happens is above like 45, 50%, it's not that it then starts going down immediately. It's that it's flat. You don't actually raise more revenue. Now you're just playing around you're basically trading off do you want more economic growth, or do you want to reduce inequality more? Do you want to, redistribute more? And at that maximum, there's a bigger trade-off between economic growth. As, like a libertarian markets person, you can probably guess, I think we should favor economic growth because that improves not only our own welfare, but the welfare of many generations in the future. But anyway, so, because of those dynamics, and because our tax code is already extremely progressive, and in New York and California may actually have passed the Laffer maximizing point because the state and local taxes are so high.
Yeah.
What we don't do actually is tax the middle class very much compared to other countries. Like if you're in Denmark, if you made $85,000 a year, your marginal tax rate would be 55%. That's how Denmark pays for its welfare state. And it doesn't pay for it by like just taxing billionaires. It pays for it by taxing the bejesus out of the middle class. You can argue that that's good and that we should want that. I disagree, but even though I'm very fond of Denmark, but that is how you have to pay for it. And so at the point where we need to raise like 6% of GDP to close our budget deficits, that's just mostly going to come out of the middle class. The money's not there. The money is not there to take it out of the wealth.
Yeah, this is okay. Again, and we are talking about populism and frankly how just the math doesn't work out. Like this is one of the left things where it's like, yeah, we just the billionaires, we tax it, and it's like, no, like for all the things that you want to do, you do have to tax the middle class. And like people like Matt Iglesias, there are people who are not total morons, center to the left, and they're like, Matt's like, you gotta tax the middle class. You know what I'm saying? He's like, they don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear that. They just want to hear like you tax the billionaires. You could somehow like make sure they don't leave the country. Because like the whole California thing, the California tax that they're like proposing, the stupid one, which is basically like a political ploy. I have been like, look, I'm not a billionaire, believe it or not. I do work for a billionaire, but I'm not a billionaire. But so it's not going to affect me.
Much to my surprise.
Yeah.
I was counting on you.
Yeah. But it's like, look, I mean, this is
rides on your private jet.
Yeah. Well, actually, I have ridden on private jets, but that's because like I'm a retainer of when you're a retainer, sometimes you get. But no, the issue is like, this sort of stuff it's stupid. It's counterproductive, and it's good for Texas. I live in Texas. It's good for Texas. Like literally, it's good for Texas and Florida. Mostly. I mean, actually, like if you're a billionaire, probably a lot of them are just gonna move to Florida because I feel like not to hit on Florida, but Texas is kind of where you want to go to make money. Florida is where you want to just chill out in your on like what is it, Jupiter Island or wherever. One of those. Texas has some too, but like their weather is better. To be candid, they have more fun there. So. Here we
Does Texas have the giant flying roaches, though? It's like my
Um,
husband's from Florida, and there is a
yeah,
reason.
Florida. Okay, the Florida part of Texas is the coast. So, like, Houston. So, as you know, because you've been to Texas, but Texas is like 5 different states.
Indeed.
I am in Austin. I don't. I say like I don't. Basically, I say the South in Texas. You draw a line between Dallas and Houston, and north of east of that is the South. Like that's Louisiana, Arkansas, Texas. Where I live is like transitioning to the west, but not quite. It's kind of like this gray zone. And then obviously when you go west of when you went to West Texas, that does not feel like the South. Like the people there, they didn't do like cotton or whatever. You know what I'm saying? It's like that's definitely so yeah. So parts of Texas don't, and parts of Texas do. And like if I'm in Houston, for example, I see lizards all over the place. I do see lizards in Austin, but not as much. For various reasons. Anyway, so but anyway, my point is like, California, New York, also like I will say, because I do hire at my company. I'll just say that, like, we don't need to go into details, but I think northeastern states, maybe aside from New Hampshire or whatever, they're kind of cooked. Like, they have like all sorts of weird. Okay, I'll give a real example. We have an employee in Massachusetts, and like the unemployment insurance and all these other things, and the health insurance. It's just a pain in the butt. There's multiple different agencies that you have to register for separately. And I asked a friend, I'm like, well, why don't they just have like, okay, we have databases where you have a common key. Okay, why can I not have a common key for this person instead of doing multiple different things? And my friend in Massachusetts was like, well, what I suspect is like there's multiple different database administrators and they don't want to lay anyone off. Okay, this is what I'm seeing in these northeastern states.
It's worse than that, Razib.
Yeah, I'm giving like, I'm like
so charming and naive. No, it's worse than that. I mean, that is part of it, right?
Yeah.
Like that is definitely part of it, that there is a keen aversion to laying anyone off in northeastern states. But it's also just that, I mean, it's that government in general is really bad at tech, partly because the salaries aren't competitive with the private sector, and partly just because the way the government does things is so rules bound.
Yes.
That it cannot update at the speed of technology.
Yes.
Jen Pahlka's book, Recoding America, is great on this.
Yeah.
But then there's also the core problem with the Northeast. And look, I live in Washington, D.C. I grew up in New York City. There are many wonderful things about the East Coast elite, as it were. I hang out with them a lot. The problem with their governments is that because they are older and richer. They're not like older in the sense that, like Ohio's been a state for a long time, right? Texas has been a state for a long time. But Texas was a really poor state in 1910. And New York was not a really poor state in 1910. And because of that, you have all of this government that built up around it. And it's not just the government itself. They had a lot of workers, and they gave those workers pensions, and they gave those workers pensions that they didn't really fund, because back in the day, this just was not that big a deal. People didn't live that long after they retired. That has all changed, but they still have all these legacy costs. They have extremely highly compensated public sector unions. They have extremely highly, relative to the market value of the services, particularly at the lower levels. A big problem with government employment is that it's not competitive for professional labor, but it's over competitive for unskilled labor. And so what you end up with is
everyone wants those, like, bus driver job or whatever, like those type of jobs.
Because
sanitation
that
work.
is a better wage and benefits than you would get doing something else. But for the people who like design the databases, it is not a better wage than you would get doing something else. And it takes a special combination of characteristics to be willing to plunge into the bowels of a government bureaucracy and spend your life there. And so they've just got a ton of legacy costs. There's no easy way to shift them. And in New York and California and in Massachusetts, because these states have big knowledge clusters, in DC, because historically we've had the federal government, and it's not going to go out of business. And it just it provides a baseline, not just of federal employment, but of all of the ancillary stuff around the government, like lobbying and journalism and nonprofits and so forth, and lawyers, so many law firms. But because of that, they've been able to afford like because they have these captive industries. Wall Street's not going anywhere. Silicon Valley, until recently, wasn't going anywhere. Hollywood wasn't going anywhere. They've been able to raise taxes more than other states. They have all of these old pension liabilities and other kinds of liabilities. They have lots of old programs, and programs are just hard to cut anywhere because once you make a program, it's got a constituency. They'll get very angry if you cut it. So they just got like much higher legacy costs, much higher baked in structural costs. And you can carry it if you were a New York or a California or a Massachusetts or a DC. The problem is, or New Jersey or Connecticut, right? The problem is if something goes wrong, you are cooked. And I think this is what you're seeing in Chicago, which is ironically known as Cook County. And the state of Illinois does not allow cities to go bankrupt. It does not allow cities to alter anyone's pension benefits, and not just the benefits they've already accrued, which I think is right and just as a matter of contract law. Once someone has taken a job with a certain amount of promised benefits, you can't alter future benefits for future work that they will do. The city also has a long history of fecklessness. It's now got its police and fire pensions are now funded less than 20% funded. The teachers, this happened. They actually did do a pension reform that, at least for new hires, was going to lower their pensions. Because this is so unsustainable. The city just tried to raise $800 million on the bond market, and they had to pull I think it was $300 million of that offering because no one wanted it. That was the tax-free part, which pays a lower interest rate. And so they are in dire shape. The state did a reform that would at least say, okay, well, the future hires are not going to get these pensions that we can't afford. And then the state legislature immediately turned around, not immediately, but after a few years turned around and did a sweetener for the city's police and firefighters because the state ones people in other parts of the state were getting better pensions. So they did a sweetener to bring them up to that level, which has put the city right back where it was. And of course, the Chicago Teachers Union, to which the current mayor belongs, looks at this and says, well, that's not fair. I mean, it's just total madness. And they are now pushing to have their pensions sweetened to make them just as bankrupt as the police and fire pensions. It's totally bonkers. I don't even understand the rationale for this, because eventually the city's going to run out of money. And then eventually, one way or another, it's going into bankruptcy. The state does not have the money to bail Chicago out. And the federal government, I guess if you got a Democratic trifecta and they controlled the Senate and Congress and like Senate and the House and the presidency, you might be able to do it. But even then, are Democrats in other states going to be like, sure, let's give Illinois, tens of billions of dollars to bail out its pensions? Seems unlikely. And so they are just not grappling with reality at all. And why has this happened? Well, because Chicago's doesn't have a strong captive industry the way that New York or California does. And it can't afford to have all of these legacy costs. Its growth is not terrible, but it's not great either. And so it just drags it down year after year. And I will say, California should look hard at Illinois, because Hollywood has been shedding jobs really rapidly.
Yep.
In part because of the incredibly high cost of doing business in California. And there's all of these tax hikes on people who make a lot of money. And of course, I'm sure a lot of your listeners are aware of what's been happening with billionaire tax, where the SEIU, it's the Service Workers Union, likes to do these kind of blackmail referenda, where they slap a referendum on the ballot that's not really, they don't really care if it passes. What it's meant to do is extort some kind of concession from their targets.
Yep.
So they've done this with like dialysis centers, with hospitals. Yeah.
Shakedown.
So this shakedown attempt, I'm not actually sure.
They overplayed their hand. They
overplayed their hand.
Yeah. The beast is awake now.
Billionaires are already leaving Silicon Valley. Now, like, are new founders leaving? Not necessarily. It's not clear to me how many people have left, but they have already shed like a big chunk of the revenue by losing people like Larry Page and Sergey Brin and
these are
Mark Zuckerberg.
That's not David Sacks. David Sacks is right wing. Yeah. Like, Larry and Sergey are like just Democrats.
Steven Spielberg, very coincidentally, just announced that he's moved to New York. He already had an
New York.
apartment there, and he
Yeah,
is
New York,
upstaked to New York City.
Yeah.
And it's pretty funny when like it makes tax sense to move to New York City
what I'm
to
saying.
reduce your tax rate.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
And like this has already cost them a big chunk of the revenue they were expecting,
Okay.
and also all of the income taxes and capital gains taxes those people would have
Yes.
paid.
I mean,
Right.
yes.
So other New York and California actually really have to look hard at this, because I think that they are actually structurally in a place where they're quite vulnerable.
Well, so
And
I am not like, so, I do have liberal friends, but I'm not like on the left. So I don't know like what they're thinking. That woman who like, kind of was like, leave, Elon left, I do not
that was
understand the
Kathy
Democrat.
Hochul.
Yeah.
Oh, no,
I
no.
do.
Sorry, that was
No,
Kathy Hochul said this. She was like,
she said the same thing.
we
But
don't want
they
you here.
do this.
Move
They
to
do this.
Florida.
Yeah, they do this. They're like, get out, you rich people. We hate you. And I'm like, okay, this is like, what are you doing? Where do you think you're like a lot of your money for all these programs? Where do you think they're coming from? I don't get that. Okay, I don't get that. Like, I mean, do they live in a bubble where they think these people? I mean, the thing is like even someone like me, like to be honest, like I spent some time in SF. Like there's a lot of agglomeration effects are real. There's a lot of brilliant people.
Yep.
I like going there, but I live in Texas. Okay, if I can do that. You know what I'm saying? Like someone like David Sack, these people can like live wherever. Like, are you insane? Like, what bubble are you in?
Let me pull back to the original question you asked about populism, because I think this really goes into it, which is that the first thing to know about populism, from my point of view, from policy populism and political populism, is that this is an intra-elite status battle. Whoever is talking about like the common man, they are fighting their personal beefs with other, call it, members of the college-educated professional class. And that is what is driving some of the bad policies, yes, are driven by just pandering to ordinary voters who don't spend a lot of time thinking about how the budget policy works, because it's complicated and they have other things going on in their lives, right? And most people do not, as I do, find this kind of interesting and fun. But so for the people who, and the stuff like no taxes on tips, that sort of stuff, that's actually no one in the policy elite cares about that policy. Trump suggested it because it polls well. It does poll well. That's, and that's also, I think, where the weird attack on investor-owned housing is coming from. It is a policy aimed at people who are not paying attention. But the other stuff, this is about elites who are mad at other elites and who are fighting for power within those elites. And that's why, like conservative, especially alt-right people, are so obsessed. Before Elon bought Twitter, they were completely obsessed with moderation policy. I used to joke that a lot of the congressional staffers that I was talking to on the Republican side should obviously just quit their jobs and go work for Twitter, like the Twitter moderation team, because that was clearly where their heart was. But it's stuff like that, but it's also more broadly a lot of these fights, the fights about universities. I think that they have a lot of valid criticisms, to be clear. I'm not saying that they are not making. Absolutely. I agree with many, many, many of the critiques of what has been going on in universities, but the viciousness with which and the indiscriminate way they've gone after universities is a lot about their personal anger or status jockeying.
Mm-hmm.
And that's also true on the left.
Yeah.
Right?
So they're lashing out.
It's okay, so if you are an upper middle class professional and you live in New York or San Francisco and you make like really good money, there was an article in the New York Times about the couple that makes $500,000 a year and themselves as middle class. Yeah, and I understand that this sounds crazy.
Yeah, I know them. Yeah.
They're living. Yeah, they're living in a 1-bedroom apartment with their kid, not even in that great a neighborhood, and they're living in roughly the neighborhood I grew up in. That's a really difficult feat to pull off. They do not feel they're saving a lot of money to try to buy an apartment, but they don't feel like they're living in luxury. And that's just a really common experience. Well, you look at you are competing for stuff that actually is zero sum, like school slots and housing in cities that that don't build things. And so for you personally, it feels like if we went after the billionaires, I would actually be better off because those people would have fewer resources to compete with me for stuff that I need and I am having trouble getting, like a house in a decent school district in a good suburb or an apartment in a decent neighborhood in New York that has more than, like 2 shoeboxes just glued together. And they're not entirely wrong about this. Just like the conservatives who are going to war on the universities are not entirely wrong that really like breaking the spirit of the universities might make them personally better off. But it's net destructive for everyone because, in fact, you cannot run this welfare state on billionaires. You cannot do it. You cannot, and like you're not. If you destroy capital, that will lower economic growth, and like that might be better for you because some of that growth might disrupt your industry. I am in one of those industries that's being disrupted right now. Don't love it. Liked the job I had. I am 53 and reinventing myself as a podcaster.
This is why you got 3 podcasts. This is why you got 3 podcasts.
Yeah, I mean, like, I am super happy. I have to say, like, I am happy as a clam doing all this. It's been a while since I've just done something I have no idea how to do. It's super fun. I'm a little too busy, and I'm kind of thinking now about, I'm not 33 when I was writing like 20,000 words a week. I need to pace myself a little bit, but I'm really enjoying doing all this stuff. But that's not how most people feel about things. I'm a weirdo on this dimension. And that's okay. Actually, I am not criticizing like, yeah, you should totally be like at 55, I want you to rip up my career and I'll start over. That's not how people are. It's okay. Most people want more stability and normalcy and feeling of control over their life than I do, in part because like I graduated from business school in 2001. I lost the consulting job I was supposed to get. It took me 2 years to find another job, and it was in journalism. It paid, by the way, 2/3 of what I had made before I went to business school and took out 6-figure loans. And that was the point at which I just realized, you can't count on anything. There's no button you can push to make the universe deliver, and I'm just going to have to be okay with that. And there are some upsides to this, right? That you do stuff that you wouldn't have imagined doing. It forces you to try new things, and that's actually net good for like both you as a person and for the world as you are experimenting and creating. But that said, that was a really brutal realization that made me extremely depressed for 2 years. It was not easy. I didn't just like pick myself up and go, "Yay, I've been disrupted." And second of all, it's not everyone's appetite. And the older you get, when you have kids, when you have obligations, it's a lot harder. So I feel for them. Right. And there's also the thing that those people are also locked into an arms race with each other. And so they have a somewhat weird preference for having the government do everything because, the competition is zero sum. And if the government just took the same amount of money from all of them and like put it into a pension, those people would actually be better off. They would have the pension and they would have less to spend on schools, but everyone else would also have less. And so like the prices of things would go down. So but that is the thing that you have to understand is that these policy battles, they're not always about policy. They're about these personal battles between conservative and both between conservative and progressive elites and between people who are merely well off and the smaller number of people above them who are extremely well off. And that is how you have to read that Hochul statement.
Yeah.
Right?
Well,
is like as a move undoubtedly heartfelt in that intra-elite status battle. And I have to say, like, these things are always going to happen, but what actually worries me about that whole dynamic is that people have actually stopped thinking about the trade-offs and the costs that they are imposing in their attempt to destroy other people in their own or a slightly higher class income social socioeconomic class.
Yeah, zero sum is how humans think. It's most of human history when we've been in the Malthusian trap. So, I do want to crap on the right a little bit, and I'm just gonna say something. Yeah. The last year I've been hiring engineers. We pay them well, and I have friends on the right mostly like not in my position. Okay, I come out of academia. I still know a lot of academic scientists. I know a lot of people that are in value-add, high-skilled, specialized positions. Okay, and so my friends, like some of them, my MAGA-tarded friends, and I tell them they're MAGA-tards to their face. I'm not like talking behind their back. Like, yeah, you're full on MAGA-tard.
You are
But,
nothing if not refreshingly honest, Razib.
yeah, but they're just like, oh, we have enough talent here. And I'm like, I'm gonna like censor some of the things that just like, you think we have enough talent here? Trust me. I spend a lot of my job scouring the world for people that will work for $200,000 on engineering projects that will like not jump away from the job within 6 months because they want a FANG job or whatever. Like these talented people. No. I do not want to hire people abroad. I do not want to have remote workers. We have remote workers in Europe, in India. We don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. That's work for me. I'm not doing that because I want them because they're cheaper, okay? Like, yes, they are sometimes cheaper quite often, but we actually I probably shouldn't advertise this. We play pretty competitive even by American rates because we want them to be motivated. So they get paid really well, okay? Like, we don't want to do two-tier employees and stuff like that. My only point is like I'm living this life looking for skilled workers. It's not that easy. Maybe if I was hiring for Goldman Sachs, I could find all the Americans that I want, but like the really skilled Americans, they can pick and choose what they want to do, where they want to live, all of this stuff. I also have friends in academia. So a really concrete example that I give, because this is like not something you can argue with because this is not like pure math. I have friends in agricultural genetics. They are losing the Chinese that used to come in to the entry-level positions to do really good research. Like, this is not fake science. This is real science. This is real science with real outputs. They're going back to China, okay? Tanner Greer, a friend of mine, we're friendly, but he has a post on his Substack about Chinese science. It's not all fake. I talk to my MAGA-tarded friends, and they're just like, oh, well, we're geniuses, some of it's like kind of racial, like, oh, we're white people, and we can outdo 100 Chinese and stuff like that. It does get to that, but it's really frustrating because, I know a lot of people, and some of these guys, they didn't even go to college. What the fuck? You don't know what you're talking about. You don't hire people that I have to hire. You didn't go to graduate school like me, and I'm sounding elitist here, but look, I am an elite person to some extent, right? And I have to hire these people, and it's like the stuff that I hear has no connection to my lived experience, right? And so that's why I'm kind of chipping out at this point, because it's like, oh, really? It's that easy? Let me give you a finder's fee. Let me give you a $25,000 finder's fee right now to find me that good American in a couple of weeks. Yeah. Actually, I'll give you $50,000, dollars.
So here is the thing that I think there's a real conflict between entrepreneurial culture and non-entrepreneurial culture. And as in an industry that has gone from being a non-entrepreneurial culture, it's gone from effectively, the base load of journalism until the 2010s was local monopolies. It was local newspaper monopolies. And that era, it was already a little challenged in the early 2000s. It really effectively ended with the Great Recession. But it's a monopoly industry, and its culture is a monopoly culture. And now it has to be an entrepreneur, which is not to say people weren't hardworking, they weren't ambitious. You got people who were really ambitious and went to the top, right? But it was also an institution that was built to take the labor they had available and use it as well as they could. And because you're a monopoly, using it as well as you can is an optimal, is like a perfectly acceptable market solution. When you're trying to found something, when you're trying to change something, when you are trying to adjust to a new reality, as my industry is, what's necessary changes. And you can't just say, well, we'll just cook with the ingredients we have. And that, I think, is so the people who are really objecting to H-1Bs, they're not wrong, right? That these a lot of these outsourcing firms kind of abuse the system in order to outsource mid-level managerial jobs at large corporations that did not need to be done by someone else. And that was just we're saving money on American labor.
Real
That's not right. That is not the issue for the professors I'm talking to, who just are struggling to get candidates because, I gather Texas is making it really hard for anyone with an H-1B
Yeah.
to get a job at Texas University, for example. I've talked to a couple of professors in that situation, right? Having a bleeding edge, we have the best research university system in the world. Yes, China is trying to catch up, but right now, like, we are definitely at the forefront, and we are destroying that by making it harder to bring people in and harder to use them, and that is and harder to fund it, and
Yeah.
that is crazy. Look, China has 4 times as many people as we do, which means, like, if you assume that, like, the number of geniuses and extraordinary entrepreneurial spirits and so forth is normally distributed, they have 4 times as many people as we do.
Yeah.
Which means that the only way we're going to stay competitive and maintain our edge is by bringing in the best and the brightest from all over the world. Bring them in, cluster them here, bring them into our universities, steal some Chinese workers, show them how much better it is to, like, live in freedom, man. And all of that is just, like, there's something called the iron law of institutions, which is that, and this goes back to this elite status battle that I've been talking about. People care more about their position within the institution than they care about the effectiveness of the institution often, right? And you see this with all of the left-wing institutions that totally melted down as people jockeyed for a position within these left-wing, especially nonprofits. I mean, like, the Poetry Foundation just got totally destroyed by a George Floyd moment. A lot of these nonprofits just absolutely stopped doing their job so they could focus on internal battles over DEI. Why? Because people care more about their position, but it is totally destructive. And I think that something like that is happening now. It is, of course, important to look how well our economy is doing for Americans and making sure that everyone has enough. That's right. But then the other side of that is we are also in global competition with other people, with other nations, and making sure we win that competition is actually an important part of making sure that Americans have enough and that we're in a good position. Because, like, this is not to say that we should go around with the foreign meddling. I didn't support Venezuela. I'm pretty dubious about Iran. But we do have an interest in remaining a superpower, both for our good and, frankly, for the good of the world, because all of the rival superpowers are worse.
Yeah,
And
if not us, who? If not us,
Yeah.
who?
So if you are undermining our ability to grow and deploy capital, as the left is, or to deploy science and get the labor we need, you are making America worse off. You are making Americans worse off, and you are making the world worse off. Wake up, people. There are more important things. Look, I love a good intra-elite status battle. I get wrapped up too. I am not claiming that I'm above this. I am absolutely not. But there are more important things in the world, and this is one of them. Sorry, rant off.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is the populist left and the populist right. They just take for granted that we are number one, that we are the hegemon, that we can do whatever we want, like whatever policies. Like, I don't want to get into the tariffs because, like, I've talked about the tariffs too much. I'm sure some of my listeners are annoyed. I did want to talk about, like, the skilled. Because a lot of people, they're like, oh, well, we have enough, like, native talent, like farm boys in Iowa. I have friends, like, and, like, they're way more retarded than me. So I'm like, I don't really care what they think, to be honest. And, like, I'll tell them, I'm like, I don't care what you think because, like, I'm smarter than you. But, like, they're like, oh, we have enough people in Iowa. And I'm just like, I mean, no, because, like, I would pay them. I would pay them a lot of money. Also, they're in the same time zone. There's, like, so many reasons why I would want to hire skilled farm boys from Iowa that could code in Rust. They're not there. Not there. Sorry, not there. And also, it's like, even like I was talking to so my company. I don't want to get into too many details, but I know some hardware people, and okay. I mean, I'll be straight up because, like, we've talked about this at a conference. Like, I don't really like mix the streams, but we have a hardware project, and obviously a lot of it has to do like international stuff, and like we're trying to do like more Americans, and the guy who's running it is Russian American. His parents are from Russia, and so it's like a lot of times you meet these like white people in these fields, and they're like the children of immigrants, often Russians, often, so it's like they're not really white. What, I'm trying to say, like, culturally,
I mean, I think the way to put this is that immigrant kids, this is also true of first generation college kids in general, right? If your parents made it out of the small town in Iowa or something.
Yeah.
Like my parents were both first generation college
Yes.
kids, and they were very interested in me having a
Oh
reliable
yeah,
job
you sure you have
about
some tenuous
journalism.
connection to upstate New York now, just like some
No,
Twitter
I'm
beacon.
just saying, it was very traumatic for my parents when I decided to go into journalism, and for people who I know that I have talked to people who've had that experience, and it's less common in my anecdotal experience anyway, among people who are second, whose
Yeah,
parents were second generation college students, where you feel a little more security.
yeah,
And you don't feel like, and immigrants, of course, who come here have the hypertrophied version of this. They come
yeah,
here, they don't have anything, they have very little social capital. They're usually not native speakers of the language. Things are hard. And so, of course, their kids grow up with a kind of fear that American kids that I certainly did not. And also their parents push them with a kind of fear that most American parents don't have. And those two things result in a very, a very, very high performing,
yeah.
very skilled community, which is just, what
Well,
you would expect from that.
what I was talking about, like, so I mean, first of all, real quickly, it's like, like we're getting these like American chip designers and all these things. And my friend who born and raised in California, but his parents are Russian, and he just started laughing. He was like, "Well, they are from India, but like they're American now." So first of all, like the Americans themselves, and we just kind of came to the conclusion, like the killer combo here is like, these countries where they're from, their institutions suck. They're not really leveraging their human capital. They come to the United States, we got great institutions so far, and like they're just doing great things. Like what? Like Elon Musk is not American. I'm just I don't want to be cliche, but you know what I'm saying. Um, but like the Native American people, like, to be honest, are not hungry in the same way. Again, like if you're like a high achieving, if you go to Harvard and all this stuff, like, oh, you can go work as a management consultant. It's a good job. It's a good life. For whatever reason, they're not going into chip design. I don't know why. Okay. They're not, I don't know why. Okay. Like I think it's fun. Like, I just like, my company just sponsored a presentation by the former head of research at Intel. This is fun stuff. I don't get it, okay? But like that is what it is. It's the world I live in. It's the world we live in. It's like this is what we come to the table with like the facts. And like I try to think of myself as a reality based person. And so I guess like my like long scream on this podcast with you is just like we are like going away. Like the woke period was like insane. Okay, it was insane.
Yep.
But I don't like the term woke, right? Because I don't really know what that means. But like, also like, people on quote my own side have also decided like, oh, I mean, I'll give you a really concrete example. There's a professor, he's retired, Norman Matloff. He's a computer science professor at UC Davis. And I've been reading him on and off for years. Like, I'm friends with like Peter, like, look, I'm friends with people like Peter Brimlow. Okay, like cancel me. Okay, no, I've been canceled a lot anyways. So it doesn't matter. And like, Peter will like, commission used to when he had a website, Norman to write stuff like, oh yeah, we could just like turn all high school graduates in America into programmers. Why do we need like foreign people? And I'm like, okay,
No,
like
that's not how that works.
you also publish Steve Saylor who writes about IQ. You know what I'm saying? Like Peter, come on. I'm just saying like this is the kind of thing where it's like, oh, like, these are people who are like super into group differences in IQ, but then all of a sudden they don't care. They're like, oh, well, you could just like turn anyone into an engineer. I'm like, oh, really? I mean, really? Like, because like that's not what you're saying in other places.
Any of these people ever attend a high school math class?
I mean, no, because like Norman was like he's a professor of computer science at UC Davis, so he probably hasn't had contact with that world for a long time. That is part of it. Actually, like I've told this story before, but Rich, Arthur Jensen, the late Arthur Jensen. So one time, he had Theodosius Dobzhansky, one of the more prominent evolutionary biologists of the 20th century, in his office, and basically this was like during the Jensen controversy about race and IQ in the 1970s. And so they were having a conversation, and basically Jensen showed some of the IQ tests to Dobzhansky, and Dobzhansky was basically like, "Oh, I didn't know that you studied mentally retarded people." And Jensen's like, no, this is for normal people. He's like, no, this is clearly a test for a retarded person. And Jensen could convince him that this was a test for a normal intelligence person. Because he's like, no, this is clearly for someone with a mental disability. Because at that point, Dobzhansky was in his 70s. The least intelligent people he had interacted with probably was a graduate student, probably for like 30 or 40 years at this point. Like he had lost total like contact with the regular human race. We're talking about people that are in their bubble, that are insulated, and we are too. I hope that I grew up in Eastern Oregon. Like, I think I'm still kind of like, leveraging that and trying to like remember the type of people that I would grow up around. Obviously don't interact with those type of people anymore, but I do come from that, kind of like rural, like intermontane West background. But there are people, it's like, they're like generations away from that. These older, boomers, some of the boomers.
So I'm going to tell a fun story. My father, my Aunt Kathy, and my Uncle James all got double 800s on their SATs. And this was back in the 60s, or the late 50s.
Yeah, before recensoring, this was very rare. Very rare.
Yeah.
This was like,
and this, by the way,
like,
all three of these people grew up in West Roxbury, Massachusetts.
Yeah.
It's totally bizarre. But and I will say that I am reporting this from my mother. I have not viewed the SAT scores, but my mother did not get a double 800 on her SATs, and also didn't like my dad's family. They got divorced when I was in my 30s, and so she had no reason to make this up. She told me this to explain why, when I got a decently good SAT score that was not a double 800, but was, I don't know, the second or third highest score in my high school.
I mean, yeah, you went to Penn.
Yeah. And I definitely did not go on my GPA.
Yeah, you've written about this, yeah.
But we had one kid from my class who got a double 800s. And ironically, he is now, or when I last looked, which was a long time ago, I believe he was working for Boston Consulting Group.
Yeah,
but that's proving your point. But so my Uncle James he says, I heard you got the score I got. And I said, and I was pretty proud of myself. He's like, totally, like, he really did not seem to be joking. He was like, I don't want you to worry about it. You can always retest.
Yeah. No,
and, like, this is actually like my Aunt Kathy and he were academics. Like, he was deep into math. He did not know any normal people. Lovely man, really, like, just a nice guy. And this was not it was not in any way a slam on him. He was just, and he might have been joking. I don't know. I was like, whatever, 15, 16. But there really was an element of that. And there has, I've encountered this element over and over again of people who just literally cannot imagine what it is like to be someone who got a 500 on their SAT verbal. They cannot put themselves
which is still probably likely less so today because more and more people are taking it. It's still above average actually for the normal population.
Right.
They
cannot imagine what it is like to struggle with stuff at that level. And it's like, I'm not saying that I am super good at imagining it either. Someone asked me, I was talking on Twitter last night about what I use AI for, which of course triggered the anti-AI people who are like, it is disgraceful that you're admitting to doing this. And to be clear, I never use AI. Like, AI does not draft sentences for me. It does not even outline for me. Although I have used it to like pull podcast notes into order and to like suggest the order of questions I've already made. But in general, like, I don't do any of that. I don't like take any research it gives me verbatim. I use it as a kind of super Google. I use it for fact checking. Again, I also fact check myself, and we have fact checkers. I use it as kind of a bunch of second pass stuff when I need, like, for example, I frequently write too long. It's quite good at flagging the baggiest bits that I could cut down. But like, we are going back and forth, and it's just clear that these people have no idea whatsoever. Someone said, like, would you, how would you take someone who, what is, I said, look, the fair critique is I've been doing this for 25 years. First of all, I really like writing. I have pretty finely developed professional ethics. I have a lot of institutional guardrails. I have a lot to lose by using AI inappropriately. And I have a lot of skills already. So I can skim something and see like, oh yeah, no, it's got that wrong. That's not the right data source, right? And how do you get a kid to get those skills? And so someone asked me, he's like, imagine what LLMs would have done to you. How would it have affected, would you ever have learned to write? And I was like, Dude, I learned to read when I was like, I don't know, 3 or 4. I was writing short stories and novels. I mean, very loosely defined, when I was 8. Like, it wouldn't have affected me. But there are a lot of people that's not true for. And the people who are screaming about this are all people who are really into either writing or art. And they cannot imagine what it's like to be someone who really can't do it. They're like, because my take on this, right, is that actually it's that AI writes it at like 92, 95 percentile. It's quite good.
Yeah.
It's not going to be as good as the best writers. It's not going to do art that's as good as the best artists.
Yeah.
But that because most people struggle getting to that 92 percentile, it's really valuable for them.
Yeah.
And it's sad for me that my unique skill is no longer as unique and useful. But the idea that we should, I'm struggling with the idea. A lot of people are struggling with like, how do you teach people to think if they're not writing term papers? But even that is a bespoke concern in some way, right? Like most of the kids who are writing term papers in high school are going to get out and never do anything that looks like a term paper. It's just they're not getting a ton out of it. You got a ton out of it. You 95th percentile writer, learn an enormous amount. It's sort of like exercise. The sad fact is that some people will benefit a lot from exercise and some people just don't benefit that much. They're not going to get that fast. They're not going to get that strong. And that's just the reality of it. And like our educational policy never grapples with that. Our labor policy is not grappling with that. People can get better. They can learn new things. You can find people who didn't get exposed to things that they could have been really good at. And I think about my own phenomenal luck. I would never have become a journalist if it weren't for blogs, for that fact that I happened to be born in a very narrow window when my particular weird set of like very fast reading, very fast writing, willingness to experiment with the internet became temporarily valuable.
Yeah.
And like so it's not that there aren't people out there. I'm sure there are people out there in Iowa who could be good computer programmers if life had gone a bit differently. But there aren't enough of them. And they are extremely hard to find, but there just aren't enough of them. We need them from other places. We need to bring those people in. That's not to devalue the people who can't do that. And this is where I actually think, I remember being on a panel with, I can't remember, maybe Ezra Klein, some progressive writer, who like visibly recoiled. We were talking about academics. And I said, sort of offhandedly, like, well, and some people aren't smart enough to go to college. And it was like, I don't know what it was like I had just shouted the N-word on stage. And the thing was, the people were like, that's so condescending. I was like, no, it's not condescending.
It's true.
I am not good enough to play WNBA basketball, despite the fact that I'm 6'2". I'm not very athletic. Being smart is like being athletic. It doesn't make you a better person. It doesn't make you a more valuable person. It is a variance in a trait.
Yeah.
And like, the thing is that those people really were the ones who had contempt, right? They have contempt for people who do not have that level of academic ability, and they hide it by pretending that academic ability doesn't vary, which is so obviously not true. Anyone who's been in a class, I remember being at business school, and a friend tutored me in math, and he's like, I don't understand why you don't get this. Right? And like, I'm fine. I'm quite good at math up to calculus. And then I don't have the intuitive grasp of the relationships. Yeah. And then I tried to help him write I was in a group project with him a bit later, and he wrote it. I was like, what is this? What are these words? And why are they related? How do you think they are related to each other? And I had the same thing of like, I can't understand why you do not understand what is so intuitively obvious to me, which is the proper relationship of English words to each other on a page. Yeah. And it doesn't make one of us better or like better in the sight of God, more valuable, more important, someone whose vote should be listened to. It just makes you different. And I think that thing, it would be better if we were more honest about this, because it's
Yeah, and like, some of the people, I wouldn't say like close friends, but some of the people that I was friends with in high school, I still see their lives on Facebook, and they actually have great lives. So that's one of the things that I do want to emphasize. Like I said, I have been ranting about populism and democracy and like where we're like, politicians, pandering to like the average person whose instincts on things like trade or whatever, like non-zero, basically they're zero-sum thinkers. But like these people actually can live good lives in the economy in this like great country that we have. They can have good jobs that, like they can have like a second, like a lake house, like what union workers in automotive factories used to have like lake houses on Lake Michigan, and these they used to have like a good middle class life, and they're very happy. They have families. They're not neurotic. They don't stress out about the same sort of positional. I mean, they stress out about different positional things, I'm assuming. I don't know this, but
of course they do.
Yeah,
they stress out about who is, the most important person in church.
Yes,
or
I was
in
gonna
the
say that.
PTA, because like that is how people are.
Yeah, and so they're not that different. They just have like different things that they're worried about, and they don't spend their time thinking about. I mean, but they have an idea of like it's like I have an idea. I mean, I actually have a pretty good idea because I interact with them socially. I have a good idea of people who are stressed out about not being billionaires, like they're only worth, like 700 million. Like I literally talked to one a week ago, but like they're gonna hit billion because SpaceX. But SpaceX is gonna make a lot of billionaires in Austin pretty soon, by the way. But so a lot of my friends are gonna finally exhale. I wouldn't say friends, but like let's say friendly acquaintances. There's a lot of people that are like really stressed out because they haven't hit the $1 billion club. They kind of feel like failures in life, and they're gonna finally exhale next year, and like hopefully, I mean, I'm not gonna say who it is, but I have a friend who's like, I call them peasant billionaires, or like low billions. But I've noticed recently, like they've been like doing a lot of patronization, like they've been more of a patron recently, and I'm like, oh, okay. Then I realized, oh, they have SpaceX, so they're gonna finally hit like above 10, I don't know, like 10, like tens of billions. And so like a friend of theirs was like, of this person was like, yeah, he finally, like the other day he was like, I'm finally starting to feel rich. Real story. I'm not exaggerating in any way.
I get it. Like, I get it.
When you're a tenuous, marginal, liminal billionaire, you could go down into the hundreds of millions at any moment. Like, it's stressful.
I don't find that particular thought stressful, but on the other hand, I find other thoughts about my own stuff stressful.
Yeah. It's like the world
audience, right?
The world we live in is like, it's always your local bubble. This is kind of what we're getting at, But in the United States, like we figured out institutional system where, and like where everyone, the pie has been growing for everybody, and I'm worried that the pie is not going to grow for everybody. That's what
I think one way to explain some of the politics of the last 10 years is that everyone lives in those bubbles. Everyone competes viciously or less viciously, but they compete within those bubbles, right? I like all of the people I think of myself as in competition with. I in fact recognize that the people who are more successful than me deserve it. So, and it doesn't particularly bother me. It bothers me that I haven't managed to do better, but everyone has an element of that. And part of that is that when you're in a bubble is looking down on people who aren't in your particular bubble and valorizing the things that your bubble is particularly good at, right? And that's just normal, but the problem is that the kind of a thin class of journalists, academics, etc., had those values in their bubble where they looked down on people who were not smart, and particularly on people who are not verbally smart. They actually don't value math smarts almost at all. But they really, really, really value high verbal ability. And they, unfortunately, then got on Twitter and just started broadcasting their particular bubble norms to everyone in a way that was quite offensive to anyone who was not in that bubble. Just as, the stuff that conservatives say about liberals, and particularly about marginalized groups among progressives, is quite offensive to people in that bubble. And I think that was really destabilizing, to find out just how much the people at the top looked down on everyone else.
Yeah. And a lot of it's like implicit, like you don't like have to say it. It's not like a part of the ideology. It's It's just kind of like baked into the worldview. I mean, yeah,
No, it's
I
sort of
don't.
like Robert Heinlein has a great thing in Stranger in a Strange Land about cannibalism.
Mhm.
And he asks, how do we know that cannibalism is disgusting and wrong? Because honestly, like, I don't think my mother ever said to me, now, Megan, you mustn't eat the neighbor children, right? How do we know? It's really quite subtle. It's in horror stories and in the reaction of other people to the horror stories. It is in jokes. It is in movies that make that into the worst possible thing. It is so baked in that you almost never have to say it out loud. And that was a lot of the dynamic within the elite class. And unfortunately, if you do that, if you perform that on Twitter for everyone, they also can pick up the subtle hints.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I
Um,
don't know. I mean, at least I'm like very open about like stuff like I mean, I think I have a lot of friends, like, I think I'm a nice guy, but you know, I don't know. I just think like, well, I don't know. There's certain circles. So look, if you're talking to me about genetics, I will listen, but I will also be straight up like, well, I know more than you. I don't really care what you think. Like I think that's one of the things I don't really care. Like, I mean, if I talk to a geneticist, there are people like my friend Alex Young is talking to me about statistics. I will listen, but that's one of the things that like has like, Razib complaints has been annoying to me, where it's like there are things people know, there are things people can do, and people should just like defer a little bit more than to other people that actually know that thing, rather than assuming that they can. We were talking about foreign policy earlier, okay? That's one of the things where it's like I don't actually talk about it that much either, and partly because like the early 2000, 3, 4, that period, we saw what happened when people think that they could, read like the Jerusalem Post and the New York Times and know everything, right? So part of it is just experience. Like I was actually talking to, I'm not just like say who it is, like Mike Cernovich, who's about like our age, and we were having dinner. He was in town, and we were talking about. It was most of the other guys were actually the other guys were geriatric millennials. Okay, but so not that far. And it was like when we were in our 20s, we would talk to people. People in their 40s and 50s would be just like, yeah, well, just you'll see. You think but you don't. Like, trust me, you'll see. Like, you will. And like, we were just thinking like, whatevs. Like, we have like new technology now. We have the internet. We can like learn things that you guys could not even imagine. And now we're just like, yeah, yep, they were right. It's
yeah.
like we're them now. And I'm sure like if I told some 25-year-old, they're like, bro, have you heard about an LLM? Like, we know stuff, And it's just like,
Yeah.
I'm sure like 3000 BC, some like, youth is like, well, check out these like, check out these cuneiform tablets. Like they can preserve our thoughts. Like, we're not like you guys that were just relied on oral.
I mean, like, and to some extent, that's true, right?
Yeah.
Writing did, in fact, enable everything that came after it. We could not have a modern industrial society without it. Um, but I also think the thing that you realize as you get older is how much is embedded in that kind of tacit stuff. I mean, the cannibalism example is funny, but there's just a zillion of those things. And this is Dean Ball, actually, I think, had a good essay on this recently, saying the thing that people who are predicting that LLMs are just going to replace everyone are not they're not understanding that how much knowledge is embedded within kind of corporate practices, stuff that no one's ever written down, that the LLM does not have access to, and that indeed the people might not themselves be able to verbalize. Right. And I've had this experience writing about both firms in distress and high functioning firms. And I will say there is a tangible difference when you go into a firm that's got a good, strong culture and into one that's struggling. But when I ask people what the difference is, almost everything they say is banal. Right. There are some nuggets here and there. I've written about some of them, but almost everything they say is just, like, well, we're really like we really try to be solution oriented. Like, okay. Thank you, Dr. Insight.
Tell me what you actually do here.
And they can't, because so much of it is like often a charismatic leader who has set a certain tone, but also the way the other people are interacting with each other and how that emerges into solving problems. It's also, that the guy, if you think in a mechanical firm, the guy who just knows every single way to tweak the one machine that's a little tricky and has never written it down. And if he did write it down, it would look like some sort of superstitious like witchcraft. And it's just all of that embedded knowledge is very hard to get at. And as you get older, you realize how valuable it is. Although I will say that you also then get probably too protective of embedded institutions that aren't working that well. And that is therefore good
Yeah.
that the youngs come in wildly overconfident, not understanding
Sure.
what they're missing,
That's why you need
and just charge
entrepreneurs.
ahead
Yeah.
and do some stuff.
Yeah, well, so like let's close out. Like we've been talking for a while. I want to close out like talking a little about AI and my perspectives because you've been using it, and we use it at our company. I mean, I use it in my writing and like various other things, but also, it's also like I think it's changing the way we talk. Like for example, like I just ask Grok when people like allude to things on Twitter. I just ask Grok what they're talking about. That Grok can tell me because Grok has access to Twitter, and so
that's really useful because there used to be a human who did that, who was doing that, who was like tracking what the little controversies on Twitter were, and you can often kind of find out by looking at Twitter trending, but it's much more useful.
But I think people are also like talking in more or tweeting in more elusive way because people are I think some of the power tweeters are just like assuming that you're going to Grok it or like Grok, who is like, for example, I don't know who a lot of these people are, these famous people. So I'm like, Grok, who is this? Like a picture. They don't caption. They don't say who it is because they know that you're going to Grok it. But anyway, what I was going to say though is like with LLMs and all this stuff, I'm far less of a doomer actually than I was 2 or 3 years ago because some of the stuff you're talking about, LLMs are great, but I'm thinking more and more and more. And not, they're going to be disruptive. Okay, they're going to increase productivity. But I mean, I'm going to be honest. Like I'm thinking that more and more they're a tool. I don't think that they're going to replace us. At least like in the next generation. Let's put it this way. I don't know what 2050 brings. Maybe something because like, we didn't actually like this computer scientists did not anticipate the LLM. Was it the transformer? All of these models were gonna they were doing something totally different in like 2020. And so we don't know what the future holds. But I will say, as someone where it's like at my company, we have Claude Code, we do all these other things. And as someone who I always I ask all of the LLMs, write an essay like Razib Khan, and it's all that's a little insipid. I mean, it's good-ish, but it's kind of insipid. I'm like, okay, this is not I can still write better than that,
Yeah, what's missing in mine, although it's picked up more of my tics over the last, which is now making me rethink some of those tics and try to be more creative rather than using my old favorites. What it's always missing is that, for me, a column, there are exceptions to this. I will sometimes just write on the news because it's in the news. But especially now, because of the podcasting, and because we reorganized our column schedule, I am now writing a print column for Monday. It goes up on the web long before that. But because of that, it has to be filed on Thursday so it can go up on Friday morning because there's no point in posting anything on the internet Friday afternoon. And so I'm now writing well ahead of the news cycle, and I am just trying to do more things that are a little more, general or and for me, a lot of those columns just start with an observation about the world.
Mm-hmm.
And LLMs don't have observations about the world, right? They right now, they may eventually, but right now they don't have unique observations about the world. They have observations that other people have already written down. And I think that's even more than the prose style, which has gotten better, is that thing is missing. It will give you something that someone's already said, but why would I bother to write something that someone's already said?
They don't have real agency,
Yeah.
That's the issue. They don't real agency. There are agents where you can give them general instructions and they go do things, a lot of different things, but they don't have real agency. Here is I'm not so, we were talking about leftists, what is it? I forget what her name is, but there's that academic. She's it's stochastic parrots,
Bender, Emily Bender.
Yeah. It's okay, she's just retarded. Okay. She's just retarded. She and her co-author are retarded. I mean, I thought Rob Wright on the podcast or the whatever he did.
I wouldn't say retarded. I would say they seem both deeply misguided about how the world works.
Yeah, they are in the academic bubble. Yeah.
Yeah, like it's
They don't.
just
They. It's like they're not interacting with people that actually like work in the world with LLMs every day.
yeah. I mean,
But they're
the
talking
amazing
about it.
thing is when Rob Wright said, I now use it instead of Google, and she said, "Why don't you go to the library?" It's like because it's not 1952,
Yes.
and the news cycle is faster, and we don't have that was just a crazy thing to say. And I do go to the library sometimes. I actually
Yeah.
love
Books
libraries.
are great. I love books.
Um, Books are great, but also the thing I really love libraries for now for what I do is old newspapers and
Sure.
magazines because
Like,
that's
yeah.
something that's really it's harder to get elsewhere.
Yeah.
Books you can buy on Amazon, you can
Kindles.
download Kindle, etc. But for the the old newspapers and magazines is just an amazing trove of kind of historical, a historical viewpoint that's hard to get other than by reading through and kind
Yes.
of seeing the world through their eyes for a bit. Um, but she also just, I mean, I to go back to what I was saying about the status battle, I think that this is like 100% that is that I listened to that podcast in kind of jaw dropping awe. Um, and what I took away from it is that those two people believe that AI is going to be extremely bad for the progressive left wing, pretty radical economic project. And to some extent, cultural product, that it is going to reduce their power. I think they are correct about that. And they have somehow turned that into, and therefore people shouldn't use it. Okay, fine. But not only that, therefore people like won't use it, which is not a good way of analyzing the world.
It's not. Yeah. It's weird.
Many companies have gone down from thinking like that, where that would be catastrophic, therefore it won't happen.
No.
That's not a
So I'm trying to,
that's
trying to
not a
be
causal
balanced.
chain.
Trying to be balanced. Like it's like being anti-vax on the right.
Yeah.
Now, to be fair, like there. So my best friend from middle school died of an allergic reaction to the anthrax vaccine when he was inducted into the Marines. Like he like
Wow.
yeah, he bled out of he had a brain bleed within a couple of hours. So they like injected him, and then like they called his dad and his fiance and were like, "Hey, Dan's dead." So that's a shock. It happens every year. Apparently, it's very rare,
Yeah.
but it happens, and you have to take the anthrax vaccine if you're going to be. So that is the cost of doing business here, And he was one of those, unfortunately. So to my listeners out there that are like vax skeptical, like I understand, on the margin there definitely are cases, and we should, whatever, like the flu vaccine. There's ones where it's like, oh, is this cost benefit worth it? Whatever. But
Over
measles.
65, definitely.
Yeah,
Definitely
yeah, it
worth it for
depends. It
over
depends.
65s and under
But I
5s.
think like I think like the AI stuff, like the Emily Bender AI people, which like it's actually a thing on some of the far left people for some reason. Not like normal liberal people, obviously, but like the far left, they're like AI denialists in the weirdest way. And it's kind of like the vaccine where it's like, okay, like this, I would say like that would be like an equivalent where it's like, oh, you're just being stupid.
There are people like that on the right too.
Yes, yeah. But I don't see it as
And
much.
I don't see it as much, but they definitely exist. And I think it's the same sense. And I get it. So there's a great science fiction story called With Folded Hands. So for your I believe that some of your listeners may be familiar with the work of Isaac Asimov. And I
Yeah.
think I can take that somewhat
Yes,
for
yes,
granted.
that for sure. Like, look,
So
if you don't know the work of Isaac Asimov and you listen to me, shut this down right now. I don't want you to be listening to me. Yeah, but go on.
no, Razib, we're not the governor of the state of New York. We
Okay,
want to help bring them to the light, keep them here where they can learn.
okay.
So Isaac Asimov's through laws of robotics. You
Yeah.
can't hurt a human. You always have to work to their benefit and so forth. So this is the short story basically twists that, and it posits a race of robots who are like omnicompetent, extremely helpful, and they do everything for humans, and they do everything better than humans. And eventually, they won't even let the humans kill themselves, right? Because their job is to protect humans, and the result is these despairing people sitting in their like little wiffle boxes. And I understand why people are afraid of that, but I will say this is that I don't actually think that that's true. I don't think that's where we end up for a couple of reasons. I don't think AI will totally replace humans at work. It will somewhat change the work that's done. And if you are in a particular job, and I am, by the way, in a particular job that's at high risk of disruption, I understand why that's scary. And, your feelings are valid, as the left likes to say. But I think that people forget about a bunch of reasons that this is going to be both slower and less diffuse than we think. Number one is prices, right? An AI might be able to replace a human in a bunch of tasks, but it might not be cost effective to have the AI do that, is one of them. Another one is that organizational culture just changes way more slowly than you think. There's all sorts of regulatory moats. There's that embedded knowledge that I talked about earlier. It is going to change things. I think it's going to be incredibly transformative, but I do not think it is going to be the everyone is on welfare except for 5 billionaires scenario that a lot of people are worried about. And I also think on the other side of that, in terms of where we get value in our lives, look, many people compete in racing even though they are never going to the Olympics. Many people go to the Olympics knowing that they are never going to be the top racer in the world, right? That they are going to get washed out in the first rounds. They're just representing their country and they're glad to be there. And that's just human reality. Most of us are not the best thing in the entire world at what we do. It's okay. We still get value from doing those things with other people. I think about one of the things that no one really does anymore, at least outside of church, that I'm aware of, but that I remember from when I was a kid, is just playing guitar and singing in groups. It doesn't seem to me that the kids do that now. I could be wrong about this. Again, I'm 53, I have no children. But that was not an uncommon thing to do when I was in high school. And it's not I'm not saying we weren't it wasn't like Glee where we'd all just drop everything and sing. But, I would say, a few times a year at least, even outside of camp, I would find myself in a situation like that.
I do now have a high schooler. Wow. Anyway, I'm old. But I think you're right. I've never heard of this thing. And I used to hear, this used to be a thing. And I've never heard of this. I've never thought about this.
But it's really, that used to be the main way people consumed music in 1900 before recorded music. And it's just really fun. It's not really fun because you're all the best singers. It's fun because you are in a group of people and you are singing a song you like, which is not always the case in church. And you're just having fun and clowning around, and it's great. And we don't dance because all of us belong in the Bolshoi. We dance because it is enjoyable to dance in a group of other people. And I think that, look, I understand the worries that AI can push us apart, but in fact, what I kind of hope is that we will make cultural choices, in part because it's harder to compete on certain kinds of skills, to actually lean into the stuff that really is joyous about being humans in groups together and doing things together, not because we're the best at it, but because they are fun to do.
You know what? The slopulism or whatever, all this slop content.
Yeah.
I think it makes IRL more important. I'm not gonna lie. I'm gonna go after we get off this, podcast because we're recording on a Saturday morning because we're busy people. We're busy people.
Yeah,
that's what we gotta do. But so I hang out with my friends all the time because it's fun. I don't know. I'm not introverted, as some people know. So I don't I do things on the internet and I read and I spend time alone. But being around people is fun, and I don't understand how AI would change any of that. I don't understand how and the whole Meta renamed itself for the metaverse, and the metaverse totally flopped, and they've basically phased it out. This is our whole lifetimes, even since 1990s with MUDs and stuff like that, with the text MUDs, people are and then what was it, other life or whatever that, what was that? What was it?
Second Life.
Yeah, that one. It's these never take off. People really like the reality of real life, and that's not going to change. So I think people should just chill out about some of this. I don't know. I'm feeling all the doomerism, and I'm sorry, Yud, and my rationalist friends, because I understand logically why they have a higher P doom, but back when ChatGPT came out 3 years ago, there were people in some of my group chats that are oh, we're not going to exist in 6 months.
That seems excessive.
Yeah.
Look, I would say it a different way, which is that you can, if you are afraid of these possible impacts, which are real possible impacts, right? I don't know what P doom is, but it's probably greater than zero. And I don't know what P despair is, but it's also probably greater than zero. You can try to halt this, which I think it actually is a climate change type problem. This is a collective action problem. I think the odds of getting China can't make a credible commitment to us because right now we're ahead. And so, like Scott Alexander, for example, who writes the Astral Codex 10, like his argument is that, well, they have good incentive to sign on to like a non-development, a pause. I think that's true, but the problem is they have an incentive to do that until they catch up and compute, and then to break the agreement, right? Like, and I'm not saying they will secretly defect. I'm just saying we're pulling out of this treaty. Right. That is just and there's no way within nation states to make binding, credible commitments like that. They're always contingent. And that is why one of the reasons I think that we are not going to pause. And so if you think we're not going to pause, which I don't, rather, I do think we are not going to pause, then you have to, the productive thing to do is not to rail against it. It's not to scream at people who use it. It's to think about thoughtfully, what do we do to reduce P-doom, and how do we build the society we want to have, which is one in which AI enables us to be more rather than less human.
Yeah.
Maybe that's Pollyannish, but I actually think it's much more practical than screaming at people who use AI or trying to ban it.
I mean, like, I have started, I will say I take for granted, like, I'm not a dev anymore, so I'm not gonna lie, I do some, like, coding still with, like, I don't do any consulting in genetics, but, like, I sometimes I get the bug and I still do some analysis, and I do use, vibe coding and stuff like that. But, for my, like, administrative stuff, we were talking about, I don't think it was, like, recorded on the podcast, we were talking about it, it's like, I've, like, done so many things that would have required a person, and also, like, stuff like accounting, it's not fun, okay? If AI can do that stuff, we can do the fun stuff. I don't know, this sounds Pollyannish. This, like, people have been saying this about the internet and other things for decades, and they're still, like, boring things. So maybe we'll figure out boring, tedious things to do with AI as well. But, like, I am definitely
the real risk is an arms race, right? Where you can imagine all sorts of ways in which, look, it can fill out the boring customer service forms. It can rationalize regulation. It can do all this stuff. And the problem is it can also enable people to, for example, scan every car accident that has happened in the city and easily contact those people in order to gin up personal injury lawsuits, whether or not, they were at fault. There are endless ways in which this could be used to make things better, but also many, many ways in which it could be used to make things worse. And we're going to have to do a lot of like institutional work thinking about how we heighten the good things and tamp down the bad things.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've been talking for a while. I should close out. I should let you go. You do your dog stuff and your kitchen stuff and all your like house related stuff. I wish, someday I need to find someone to talk about like housing, because like living in Austin, Texas, I feel like I'm in the future, because I think even the blue state people, I think the Yimbys are actually breaking through. I think like finally, like, boomer degrowth communism, or whatever you want to say it, I think like it's finally like, it's cold dead hands are finally getting released.
You should talk to Bobby Fijan, who is local.
Yeah, I mean, I hang out with, I should call, I hang out with him in Austin. Like I go to their events, so I talk about,
I had him on my Reasonably Optimistic, and he was good.
No, I've been promoting American Housing Project. I mean, but like that's one of the things where I think because like I think I've been expressing a lot of like frustration with populism and stuff like that. Oh, Joshua Steinman, who's a friend of mine, just said the only country they should be from is the United States of America when it comes to like doctors. I'm like, okay, again, we've had foreign doctors forever. Okay, like Joshua, like give me your American MDs. Like fucking educate them yourselves. Okay, motherfucker, fucking educate them and shit. Like I'm tired of this shit. I can't like stand this from my side anymore. It's like it's fake. It's as fake as the left wing stuff about how you can just like tax billionaires to death. Like we don't have all the people. Okay, this is not a conspiracy. We don't have all the people.
But we could. We don't have all the people, all the best doctors in the world. But have we thought about trying to get them?
Yeah. Anyway, all right, I'm gonna let you go. I apologize to everybody that like you saw a side of like me that was like kind of a little angry and annoyed, but like I'm getting to the age where it's like, get off my lawn. I've seen all of this.
Right.
I'm tired of this. It's like it's really great to be in your 20s and be like bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and like not have made all the mistakes, so that you can see other people doing it and starting to like rip your hair out. But you know what? Like I still got a full head of hair right now at this age, so I'll count my blessings. So I have hair to give So, if I pull it out, it'll be good. I will see you online, and obviously, I'll link to all your podcasts and your column. You're one woman content machine now. Like it's like you're just like all over the. Wait, are you on TV now? Are you on TV?
No.
Okay, that's the one thing you're not going to do the TV thing.
No, I'm too good for linear television. I'm in the future. Also, I don't have a television contract.
Okay, well, I mean, because that would be good. That's good money. You know what I'm saying? Like maybe an extra house somewhere. But the thing is, because I think it's like really funny how many boomers, no offense to boomers, like still watch the. There's so many of them, and they still watch this stuff. Like they are getting paid for a reason. They want to see you talk for 10 minutes about something you barely know about. They do want. And then you get paid for it.
I prefer the podcast format. Let's just leave it at that. Yeah, it's hard. It's really hard with the format of those shows. It's hard to say anything, and it's not really their fault. I have actually enormous respect for how hard it is to do good television. I mean, I'm frequently on Chris Starwalt's News Nation Sunday show. I'll do that like once every few months, and I really like it. I think Chris Starwalt is a fantastic host. But it's like the thing of doing that all the time. I don't know how they do it. It's phenomenally difficult to do well.
You know what? People say that about you probably. Like, I don't know how she writes that much. So, to each his own. Like, we all have our talents that God gave us, right?
Indeed. Well, go forth and use your God-given talents.
Yeah, I gotta go have brunch with Eric Kaufman. We're gonna talk about stuff. So I'll talk to you later.
Cheers.
Bye.
This podcast for kids